call this meeting to order, and I'll ask you to rise for a moment of silence. Thank you. Please be seated. Scugog is situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history. Today, we acknowledge that we are gathering on the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation. We recognize and deeply appreciate the historic Indigenous connection to this land and recognize the contributions First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples have made, both in shaping and strengthening this community in particular, our province, and country as a whole. Thank you. Matters from closed session. Just want to report that the township has retained Loopstra Nixon LLP to defend the township against this claim. Okay. Is there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we'll move on. Announcements from council and staff. Councillor Watton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just want to say what a pleasure it's been working with this team for the last year, and to say that I'm looking forward to the next 3. I think we've accomplished a lot already, and I think we have great things ahead of us.
Thank you, and we're just into our second year now, so hope everything goes as well the second year as it did the first. Thank you, Councillor Watton. Any others? Councillor Brown.
Through you, Madam Mayor, they're not here at the moment, but I expect they will be back presently because they left most of their stuff here. I'd like to welcome, when they arrive, Antonio Ienco, Stella Acquisto, and Alex Lapano of 1191 Entertainment in Vaughan. Stella's also a reporter for City TV. They're doing did an interview with me this afternoon on aging and sportscasters, so I'm looking forward to. They're doing a story on the Raptors World Championship and the effects thereafter, so they're not here right now, but they should be along presently.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. We're going to bring some notoriety to Scugog Township. Thank you. I'm pleased to announce, and I'm sure that, well, certainly the press has it, but that the township received $1 million from the Mississaugas of Scugog Islands First Nation at their awards, their financial awards last week that they do every year. That is contingent upon, and this for the Blackstock Recreation Center, and it's contingent upon a successful grant application. So that was great news for Scugog, and I know that we're all very, very appreciative of our association with the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation. And this afternoon, maybe you'd like to make that announcement. You go ahead, you make that announcement. And I'll just highlight one more thing. I just got the ride program statistics, and people are still not getting the message. Drinking and driving, it's a dangerous pastime. So I want everybody to, we love our people in Scugog Township, and we want to keep them here healthy and safe. So please be very careful out on the roads. Are you the 2 gentlemen that Councillor Brown just spoke about? Well, welcome. Thank you very much for being here, bringing some notoriety to Councillor Brown and to Scugog Township. And any other announcements from staff, or from the council? Staff? Any announcements? Chief, what's your announcement from today?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to actually thank the community for their generosity. Today we had the opportunity, along with yourself and Councillor Watton, to deliver a fire truck load of toys to Operation Scugog. And you know, it's a heartwarming opportunity to be able to give that generosity to Operation Scugog. And again, I'd like to thank the community, and while I have the microphone, I'd like to wish you and the rest of the council a very Merry Christmas. And
thank you,
happy
and same
prosperous
to you.
New Year. Thank you.
Same to you, Chief. Yes, Councillor Watton and I attended just after our morning meeting, and we had a little tour while we were waiting for the fire truck to arrive. And it's amazing, the generosity of our community. It's just amazing. It's so heartwarming. So lovely to see that the fire department was on side, and I think all the guys and girls enjoyed it too. Any other announcements, Director Coleman?
Thank you, Mayor Drew. I'm very pleased to announce that the Scugog's first dog park is now open and ready for use. The road still needs a little improvements. I apologize for the condition. The snow came before we could finish improving the parking lot and the road to it, but the park is open, and judging by the feedback on social media so far, it's very popular and it's being well used already. I don't have the numbers, but there's a lot of shares, a lot of positive comments, and there was, I think, over 70 likes last time I looked, so.
That's great. That's great news. Thank you for getting that done in time for you, to you and your department. So thank you. Any other announcements from staff? Okay, seeing none, no delegations or presentations. Consent agenda. I have a number of polls from the consent agenda. I have 9.1.2, 9.1.5, 7, 9.2.1, 0.2, 0.5, 9.4.2, and 9.4.6. Are there any other polls? Okay, seeing none. Could I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes or the agenda items that were not polled? Councillor McDougall, Councillor Guido. And just for everybody's understanding, that is to receive for information. If you really, if you have something that you would like to change or act on a recommendation in the minutes of some of these, of our township advisory committees, then you need to pull it. So there was some confusion about that, so I just wanted to make sure everybody understood. Okay, so all in favor of approving the rest for information? Okay, that is carried. Thank you very much. So we'll move to 9.1.2. Is that you, Councillor Ross? I don't know who that is. Or is it you, Councillor McDougall?
Lance Brown.
Councillor Brown. Okay, you have to make your signature a little clearer.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I apologize for the sloppy
That's okay.
penmanship. I just, in that meeting, item 9.2.3 of the meeting, it's talking about the Queen Street pilot project. I just want to reiterate what I think I said at the time, and that's that the BIA really feels that it's important for them to be consulted. They want to be a full partner in this, if in fact they are going to be a partner at all, because they're conflicted when it comes to, at least that's my impression, when it comes to whether or not they would approve such a thing. But they do, as does the chamber, want to be consulted full up on this. So I just want to make that point publicly.
Yes, thank you. And I think, what was the agenda item number on it?
Well, it's 9.2.3
Okay.
in the GPA,
yeah.
December 2nd.
I believe the third part of the motion was that there would be a full consultation, and that would include the BIA. And the reason why I think this was brought forward in the first place was as a result of the pilot project on the patios. There was a lot of comments about having the street closed off. So that's one of the reasons why I think we were looking at it. So there has been a little bit of consultation, and we will certainly have a lot more before that's put in place. So thank you very much for bringing attention to that. Could I have a motion to approve those minutes then? Councillor Brown, Councillor Watton, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. 9.1.5. That's the Environmental Advisory Committee minutes, and that is on page 27, right. I pulled that one, but also Councillor Brown, you pulled it? Was it, your signatures look very much the same. Okay, did you want to make the motion, please?
Sure, I'll make a motion to move those minutes.
To receive the minutes.
Sorry, to receive the minutes, thank you.
Okay.
And further, there was a recommendation made on page 28 by the Environmental Committee that sorry, I'm gonna read it because I think it's easier. SEAC requests that the Township of Scugog develop and implement a recycling, paper and plastic pilot project at the following locations for a period of 1 year, at which time it will be evaluated for effectiveness: Palmer Park, Scugog Community Recreation Center, and the Blackstock Recreation Center.
So you're moving to approve that recommendation?
I think that that recommendation should be referred to staff, if that's possible.
Okay, yeah, that's possible. So there's an amendment to the motion then?
Yes.
Okay. Seconder for the amendment, Counselor Watton. Questions or comments to the amendment? Referred to staff. All those in favor of the amendment? Now the amended motion. All those in favor of receiving for information and referring to staff?
Wait, there should be another amendment. Madam
Oh,
Mayor.
another amendment, okay.
Yes. Further in the minutes, under correspondence, there was a request, or they made a recommendation that there should be a donation made to North Durham Nature, Friends of the Nonquan, for $500 for installing a kiosk sign,
Yes?
and that does not fit underneath the mandate of the committee.
Right,
So
so
that will be deleted.
That would just be under receiving for information then?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so there's no need for another amendment. Counselor Watton?
If I may, Madam Mayor, I just have a question for what is the Pheasant Pen sign, and what really was it for? What was the sign for?
The-
Can you elaborate? Because I couldn't figure out.
The Pheasant Pen is at the Nonquan Recreation, or the Nonquan Education Center, and I believe it was a sign that was basically for anyone who would attend the site for educational purposes at that center, describing the Pheasant Pen and the activities that were there.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Any others? Okay, I just had a correction that you could take to the next meeting, Counselor McDougall, and it's on page 28, and it's under your updates, and it says about the survey online for rural transit, and it said, since the cuts to go, there is a demand service, on demand. On-demand service was done long before the go was cut, and it is through Durham Transit, not through Island Taxi. They may be the provider, but it's Durham Transit that you have to book it through. So if you book it through the taxi, you're gonna have to pay full shot. Okay, can you make them aware of that?
I will do that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, to the amended motion, all those in favor? And that's carried, thank you very much. And now we have Grants Advisory Committee 9.1.7. And that was pulled by Councillor McDougall. Yes?
I didn't have a second for that.
Oh, I'm sorry, there's no seconder for that last motion. Councillor Watton. Okay, thank you. And so this is now grant, is it the grants? Is that where we are? Grants?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Grants Advisory, 9.1.7. And Councillor McDougall, you pulled it?
Yeah, I'll move to receive those.
I beg your pardon?
I'll move to receive those.
Thank you.
A question I have is on page 38. It says the committee reviewed a submission to receive from RH Cornish a request for $10,000 to assist in the cost of replacing a playground equipment at the school.
Just a moment. You said 38?
Page, oh, sorry, thank you. 36
Okay. Yes?
at the top of the page. I believe this has been deferred. But my question is the grants committee open to receiving requests for funding for playgrounds? And if so, can our community groups put forward similar requests? And I'm not sure who to direct this to.
Would that be you? Who's on the grants? Oh, would it be Ms. Barton?
Ms. Valentin is gonna be.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Who do I direct it to?
Madam Mayor, I'm not certain about this in terms of whether this would apply to school equipment. We'd have to look into this and get back to the counselor.
That's probably a good reason why it's being deferred till March. Okay,
Very good, that's all. Thank you.
anything else? Okay, seconder for the motion? Counselor Ross, questions or comments? All those in favor? And that's carried, thank you. And the next is the Lake Scugog Enhancement Project, 9.2.1. Counselor Ross, did you want to make the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, please make the motion.
Thank you. Seconder? Counselor Guido, go ahead.
Question, I believe, to Director Coleman.
Okay.
In regards to the financing for this, for a project that council has endorsed in principle, and one that depends heavily on government grants, given that this proposal is for additional funding, how much more is this project to cost before we get to the stage, that line in the sand where it's a go, no go? I know that this additional funding was triggered by the Ministry of Environment, but how many more consultations will be involved? What kind of price tag are we looking at going ahead?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, these are all our known costs that we have to complete the detailed design. Through the permitting process, we require permits from Parks Canada, Transport Canada, Fisheries and Oceans. So more things could come up, so there could be additional expenses, but at this point, we're not aware of any other expenses.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Would there be, you said that this is a known cost, is that correct? Okay. Are there any other known costs that will be coming before council for additional funding approval at this time?
Through your Madam Mayor to the councillor, as far as design go, there's no other known costs. Construction costs we have in here as well, and that hasn't been approved yet. Sorry, we do have some in the capital project, but it's highly dependent on fundraising and grants.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this report? All those in favor of the recommendation? Sorry. Okay, questions, go ahead.
So through you, Madam Mayor, on page 42 of the report, I see Kawartha Conservation will contribute $20,000 to cover staff costs. And then Healthy Lake Scugog chips in $15,000, and then shortly thereafter, we're requesting, or it is being requested, $15,000 from the township to Kawartha Conservation. Could you explain that a little bit better for me? Because I see money going back and forth, but I'm not sure why.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, I can understand the confusion. So Kawartha Conservation staff charge their time towards projects. So they had a budget in 2019 of $20,000 to provide project management services. So that first $20,000 didn't cost us or the project anything. At our last Healthy Lake Scugog meeting, they indicated that they're over that $20,000, and they asked for a motion through the Healthy Lake Scugog committee for up to an additional $15,000 to cover their costs. This committee is a committee of council, so similar to other committees, they can make recommendations, but it's not an actual approval until council approves it. So the committee recommends the $15,000, and now we're asking council to approve the $15,000 to pay Kawartha Conservation.
And this is from the fundraising account.
The majority is from fundraising. The township also has some money in that account as well.
Yeah. Okay. Anything further? Not again, mover and a seconder. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. 9.2.2, the always stop warrant analysis, and that was pulled by Councillor Brown and Councillor Guido. Councillor Brown, and that is on page 50.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion, if I may, please. Okay, that COMS 2019-047 always stop warrant analysis results be received, that always stop controls be installed at the intersection of Union Avenue and Victoria Street, Earl Cuddy Boulevard, that always stop controls be installed at the intersection of Perry Street and North Street, and that the bylaw appended as attachment 3 to report COMS 2019-47 be approved as amended.
Okay, thank you. And can you give some rationale for your, first of all, get a seconder. to this? Okay, Counselor Watton, go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. I've been in touch with a number of residents, most of them on Perry Street. They've come up with a petition. I've talked to Director Coleman about it. I know where she stands on it. It's not recommended, but I'd like to see if we can change that. So I'd like to thank the director, as always, for her diligence, but I question a warrant analysis that hasn't been updated locally in 15 years. Traffic patterns and the amount of traffic has increased. There needs to be a warrant review. I'd like to point out that North and Perry have had 5 collisions we know of in 10 years, while the warrant says an average of 4 per year for 3 years. So I say collisions we know of, because as you know, many of these go unreported. The traffic manual states at 4-way intersections, traffic from the minor street must equal at least a third of the total volume. It does. The manual states always stops be preferably at right angles. The angles here, while not 90-degree, are not far off, and it's preferred, but not necessarily in stone. And we have precedent. The warrant states that the nearest traffic control has to be 250 meters away from a 4-way stop. Well, on Old Simcoe at Queen, there's a 4-way. And at 7A, there's a traffic light, and that distance is nowhere near 250 meters. Finally, we have precedent in the John and Mary intersection, which didn't meet warrant either, but we put one in anyway, and all I've heard since is thank you.
Questions or comments? On the, well, it's the recommendation. He didn't use the recommendation, he made a motion, so it's not amended, it's his motion. Okay. Okay. Yep. Go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Brown. I do have a question on the, I should back up. First of all, on the recommended all-way, 4-way stop at Union and Victoria, I would sincerely like to thank staff for doing that warrant. The residents there desperately have wanted this to be installed for years, and hopefully pending a positive council vote, this will be going through. My question though is in regards to the one at Chimney Hill and Old Simcoe. And the comments on page 10 of 18 of the report, or page 59, where it says, based on the engineering analysis, the intersection of Old Simcoe Road and Chimney Hill Way and Bay Street did not meet any of the warrants for an all-way stop control. However, as a result of traffic studies related to the new subdivisions on the west side of Old Simcoe Road, future improvements to this intersection are planned, including a left turn lane. Can you explain further what those future improvements are planned to be and when the residents can see that benefit? Many residents who live in that subdivision have been asking for an all-way stop at that location. Our previous term of council, the same question came up, and I appreciate that it's an offset intersection, but it's also a horrible intersection because it's offset and because of the traffic flow. Can you please speak to what the future improvements will look like?
Director Coleman?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. As you've read, there will be a left turn lane added. There are also plans to align the intersection so it is not offset anymore, because that's, as you said, that's not a good design for an intersection being offset. We also plan to put a sidewalk on the west side so that people don't have to cross there. They can walk across up to Queen Street and cross at a stop sign there instead. If the sidewalk continues along the west side. And the timing for it, it's developer dependent. Our best estimate right now is about 2 years.
Through you, Madam Mayor, maybe I can't visualize it. If we have a left turning lane, where would that be? That would be on Old Simcoe heading north, or Old Simcoe heading south? Where is the left turning lane?
It would be on Old Simcoe on a northbound left turn lane.
Northbound. So if I'm at that intersection, going down Bay Street or up Chimney Hill, I'm now having to jockey 2 lanes of traffic going northbound on Old Simcoe with the turn lane and another lane going southbound. So does that not sound like it's adding more confusion at the intersection?
Through you, Madam Mayor, councillor, that type of intersection works in other locations without any issues.
Okay.
Further?
Those are all my questions for now, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Director Coleman. Just, there appears to be an offset between public's wishes, council's wishes, and the way that the all-stop warrant analysis that you work from in the OTM, there's a disconnect there. Can you walk me through the always stop sign warrant analysis? How much of that percentage is based on the, the OTM that you have, and what percent is based on, in-house policy?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, the always stops warrant includes larger cities as well. So there is a section about the larger roads, the collectors and arterial roads, which most of that doesn't apply. There's not many places intersections we've looked at that meet that. Most of them we're looking at is the always minimum warrant for minor roads. The bulk of the OTM standard is in our warrant policy. As part of this review, I also looked at other warrants from other municipalities, and the majority of them follow very similar to what we do and follow the OTM. I know it's a bit dated. The OTM was written in 2000. That was the last update. Ours was done in 2005, but there haven't been many changes in the traffic engineering world related to stop signs since that time. So I didn't think there was any point in updating our policy. I felt it was still relevant.
Thank you. If I may, through you, Madam Mayor. When you're talking about grabbing the warrant analysis from different communities, is it safe to say that they do differ? I know that Toronto has one that's different than ours in many respects, but being that it's a bigger city, perhaps that's the reason. But if they differ from township to township or city to city, are they based on what's important to the population, or is it more the traffic dynamics of that municipality?
Director?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I didn't look at the Toronto one in much detail because I think Scugog is very different than Toronto. We're a lot less volumes and it's as a big city, we're not a big city. The ones I looked at from other municipalities were not that dissimilar from ours. Because they're all based on the same manual, they're all quite similar.
And further through you, Madam Mayor, when was you? I know this is outdated. Or you said it's a bit dated. When was it last looked at as far as revisions on the policy?
Through you, Madam Mayor, our policy was looked at in 2005, and as I mentioned, I considered updating it. I looked at it, and there's nothing I would really change at this point. I don't think that there's been, as I said, much changes in traffic engineering about stop signs since then. So it wouldn't update it. If the OTM updated their manual, then I would look at updating it.
Okay, through you, Madam Mayor. Is the policy update based purely from an engineering point of view as far as on the OTM, or is there a component of it that is based on the population? Given that I know Councillor Brown has had a number of people approach him, we've heard earlier from the other four-way stop that we discussed in previous council that there's an appetite in the community for always stops. What portion of this policy looks at the actual community and what's important to the community?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the policy is based on engineering standards. There was one community that does it on a survey basis that you need a certain amount of support for it. But as I noticed in the attachment, the fact sheet about it, which I borrowed a lot of that information from other municipalities, there's a lot of negatives that people don't think of when they ask for stop signs. They believe that putting in stop signs everywhere makes everything safer, and that's not actually true if they're overused and people do not obey the stop signs. You can cause false sense of security. It has negative impacts to emergency vehicles. They have to, by law, stop at every stop sign as well. As I said, people will start disrespecting them if there's too many of them. False sense of security, environmental impacts. You're using more gas, you're stopping and going, more noise, more emissions. You get frustrated drivers. There's a lot of reasons why you need to think twice before you put a stop sign in.
Further, seeing the list that you have here that you pointed to on page 51 of the report, a lot of these are, well, they're subjective and objective as far as, providing a false sense of security and the environmental impact and frustrating drivers, which aren't engineering perspectives. Can you walk me through what kind of time commitment it would be to review the policy and to look at it from taking into account what's important to this community, understanding that it is different than other communities, and if they differ back and forth, then how much time it would take to actually review the policy, just because there is a disconnect between what council has voted in previously and what we're hearing from the community based on what we have on a policy from 2005.
Through you, Madam Mayor, as I said, I did review the policy as part of this report, and I don't see any changes that I would recommend at this time. I would want some kind of direction from council, what kind of changes you would like me to look at, but I don't think it needs changes. Like, based on my review so far, there's nothing I would change.
Thank you.
Further? Councillor McDougall, did I see your hand?
Not yet, but I can put it up. Having a look at the intersection of Paxton, John, and Perry, and seeing the sidewalk on the south side of the road, can you walk me through how I would safely cross to the east side of the road from the west? Through to Director Coleman, thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, it would be like crossing any other road that doesn't have a stop control at the intersection. You wait on the sidewalk until there's a gap in traffic, and you cross to the sidewalk on the other side.
Sorry, further through you, Madam Mayor. That sidewalk is aligned with the center of John Street and not aligned with John Street at all, and you're crossing to Perry Street. I know the intersection well, so I'm just curious as to maybe a four-way stop doesn't help that, but it certainly assists in, a pedestrian crossing two streets, but you have at least the stop on Perry Street.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, again, based on the warrant, it's not warranted there. The traffic volumes on Paxton and John are very light. If we could look at, as part of our active transportation plan, we should be looking at making sure sidewalks line up better than they do now in some instances, but those are the types of improvements I might recommend, but I don't recommend a stop sign.
What intersection were you talking about? I'm sorry.
Sorry, by the Scout Hall on Perry and Paxton.
Oh, Perry, so it's not on this list that was being investigated?
Yes, it is.
It
It's
And I'd just like to add,
page 60.
page 60, I'd just like to add too, that I spent about 20 minutes on a lunch hour sitting there eating my lunch, watching traffic. The cars on Paxton Street going westbound on Paxton Street and turning right onto Perry, I'd say over 50% of them were not coming to a stop at all or even close to it, and they have a stop sign. So that again goes with what I'm saying, that putting a stop sign doesn't necessarily make it safer.
Further?
Sorry, through you, Madam Mayor. So is that an enforcement issue then?
That's an enforcement issue, yes.
Further, I think I'm echoing Councillor Brown's and Councillor Ross's suggestion to say that I think we need to look at the always stop warrant. My brief review of the Toronto warrant does not talk anything about distances between stop control devices. It talks about local roads, which most of these are, having 250 vehicles for an average period of 4 hours a day. It seems that their requirements are significantly different than OTM's. I'm not sure if the City of Toronto has engineers that would look at this as well, but it appears that they are looking at it differently than we are. But that's all at this time. Thank you.
referring to Toronto? It is quite a bit different from Scugog. But I see your point. Anything further? Councillor Watton and then Councillor Brown, I'll let you finish up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to back up to, again, further to Councillor Guido's comments about Old Simcoe Road and Chimney Hill. I note that you do say once the improvements are have been completed, that consideration would be given to a pedestrian crossing at this location. Can you speak to what type of pedestrian crossing, or is it too early to speak to that? Will it just be, you know, a crosswalk? Will it be signalized? What would we be able to anticipate or consider?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. I did a preliminary look at it, high level, so please don't hold me to this, but it could be a pedestrian crossover type thing, like they installed on Reach Street in Uxbridge, that type of crossing.
Sorry, what does that mean?
It's, through you, Madam Mayor, it's, it has overhead signs that show the crossing. It might or might not have flashing lights as well.
Okay, thank you.
I had Councillor Ross too. I'll let you wind up as the mover of the motion. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple questions. We're talking about always stops here, but there are other ways of dealing with intersection. Do such things like roundabouts or other examples of engineering infrastructure that can go into these stops, does that come into play at all when looking at these intersections, as far as understanding that there's a need or a want from the community as far as a safe intersection, but then your professional opinion as far as an always stop is not warranted? Is there a medium somewhere in between, or is there other alternatives that are ever looked at?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. Typically, roundabouts are used instead of traffic signals or traffic lights. So the warrant process for traffic signals is a lot more has to be met to warrant traffic signals. So in those cases, you might consider a roundabout instead. They're also a lot more costly. There'll be a minimum of $250,000 to construct one.
And you need a lot of land too for it to.
You need a lot of land as well.
Is that what you were going to say, Councillor Guido? Oh, okay. You're putting your hand up. Okay. Further, Councillor Ross?
Further, question in regards to the Bay and Rosa Street intersection. In the traffic analysis that we have here, it mentions traffic volumes on each leg of the intersection. Based on the numbers that you have in your report, there's a 400 times more cars going on Bay Street than on Rosa. And the stop sign is on Bay Street, where the volume of cars is the greatest. Driving that daily, I've been through that. Can you explain to me why it's that way and not the other way?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the councillor, if I was designing this as a brand new intersection, I would put the stop signs on Rosa Street, not on Bay Street. They're already there, and so I'm leaving it as it is because no one has requested to change it, and it's working as it is.
Okay, through you, Madam Mayor, the request for this, not being familiar with the request itself, is it for a safer intersection, or is it for specifically an always stop, but perhaps the end goal is just to have a safer intersection?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the request was just for an always stop. And I think it was related to the increase in traffic through that intersection while the construction at Simcoe Street and Reach Street was occurring.
Okay. So, pardon me, through you, Madam Mayor. So understanding that you would redesign this on Rosa and that we're looking at this intersection, is it not a good time now to address that, or would that intersection be addressed at a later point as far as moving the stop signs around?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I don't know the history of the intersection. I'm guessing that someone in the past asked for the stop signs to be on Bay Street to slow down traffic, to maybe potentially reduce cut-through traffic. So there was probably a reason why it was done that way, and I don't know the reason for sure.
Okay, thank you. And through you, Madam Mayor, as I've said before, your professional opinion is understood as far as the warrant analysis is on here, but I've mentioned that there's a disconnect with what I've been hearing and what, you know, I'm hearing around today and what we've had in the past. How do we get from your engineering, I don't want to say ideals, but your opinion and what the greater view of the community is we do a public consultation for a lot of things. Is this something where that would come into play going forward?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, it's not just my engineering opinion. It's traffic engineers across Ontario have this same philosophy and use the same general rules to decide when always stops. They're not the solution to everything. People think that they slow down traffic, but they have studies that show that they slow them down at the stop sign, but then they go faster in between because they're trying to make up the time they lost for stopping. There's actual studies that show that. So I don't support anything that goes against these principles that everybody is using.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Cieo.
Madam Mayor, if I could, I think the director has explained herself numerous times in the last half hour. And if council don't wish to follow the direction of staff, make a decision. That's the alternative for them. I think staff have put forward their best professional advice based on the TAC guidelines, and councils can act accordingly. I think just continuing this question, she's answered this question several times now.
Okay. Anything further? Councillor Guido?
If
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry,
just-
you still have another question?
just in follow-up, I'm looking for a way to bridge the gap between your professional opinion and the desires here, as opposed to, I'm not hammering down on you, I'm trying to find a solution to it. The always stop that you said you wouldn't change it, I understand that, and the always stops, they're differ between communities and in Toronto. What's the major difference between the communities and our community?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the councillor, I would have to do a study to tell you the differences between them. I looked at them more at a higher level, and they were all generally the same. The general principles were very similar.
Okay, thank you.
That's it? Okay, thank you. Councillor Guido and Councillor Brown, just, you know, we have dealt with this for a long time. If you have amendments that you want to make, the only thing that I would say is if you put it out to the public, I think you're going to have to have about 50 or 60 requests, because I think a lot of people feel that a four-way stop is going to alleviate all the problems. But, Councillor Guido?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And following what you just said, on page 51 and 53 of the report, it mentions that these always stops should not be used as a device to protect pedestrians, or where the protection of pedestrians is a prime concern. Understanding that a lot of these petitions may come to us as council, and we are elected to speak on behalf of council or the residents. They're concerned about traffic. They're concerned about people walking across the street. If the OTM says that you should not use the four-way stop to protect pedestrians, what do they suggest should be used, or what measures should we as a municipality be looking at to protect our pedestrians who are trying to cross the road? If a four-way stop isn't what we're suggesting would do that, what can we do? We can't simply ignore the concerns of our constituents for safety. So what is staff's recommendation?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the councillor, it's an unwarranted four-way stop that doesn't protect pedestrians. If there's a warrant, if it meets the warrants, such as Union Avenue in Victoria, then a stop sign will give them a safe place to cross. If it's an unwarranted location, they need to walk to the closest warranted location and cross there. That's what I would recommend.
Okay, and appreciating that we're not wanting to entertain this much further, I don't read that way in the report. It just says that it should not be used where the protection of pedestrians or school children in particular is a concern. When you have a 9-year-old, an 8-year-old, 7-year-old, whatever, when they're trying to walk, My question is, what are we doing to keep our pedestrians safe then? Walking to the next four-way stop, as you've indicated in previous discussions, isn't necessarily a safety measure either, simply because driver behavior, you found in the reports or studies say that they don't always stop at stop signs. So that's not necessarily a safe alternative either. So perhaps this is a discussion for another time, but I do think we need to consider the safety and how we're going to address it as an entire township. My last question then is on page 64, where it speaks to the township is endeavoring to do a speed, sorry, let me get to that. On page 64, it says the above issues with respect to speeding and the community safety zone will be addressed during the township speed limit review study. Perhaps I have missed that in the past, but what is the township speed limit review study, and what are we planning to achieve with that?
Yeah, we did discuss this early in our term.
Okay.
Yeah, but go ahead, Councilor, or Director.
It's through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. It came up as part of our strategic plan discussions at the start of this year. And municipalities, they changed the Highway Traffic Act, and municipalities are now allowed to do large areas, like you could do all of Port Perry, you could do all the rural area. You can set default speed limits that are lower than those in the Highway Traffic Act. And there are some municipalities that have done that. So the study is looking at, do we want to do that, or do we want to just look at individual roads and do individual studies for certain roads that should be lower and just leave the default speed limits as they are?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And when will we be starting that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, I was working on it in the summer. I'm doing it internally myself. This fall has been, my workload has been much too high. I haven't been able to get back to it. So it's time dependent on when I have the time.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilor McDougall?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through to Carol, just to share some history. The flow of traffic in the corridor between Lilla Street, which is now Simcoe Street, and Old Simcoe was north-south. Bigelow, Cochrane, and Rosa all ran north-south with yield signs that ran up and down the hill. So anyone who was going up and down the hills would be required to yield to the north, to the north and south drivers. Those were changed to then flow the other direction, and they've slowly been flipping back. Since that time, we've added subdivisions on the far side, and we've seen cross-cutting through that historic neighborhood. Those neighborhoods were cohesive, they were not cut by traffic, and we didn't have cross-cutting in anywhere near the volumes through those neighborhoods. I'd like to offer a friendly amendment to Councillor Brown's amendment, and I'd like to make the amendment that we update the always stop warrant policy and defer the other locations until after that policy is updated, if you would consider it.
So you're talking about the, Councillor Brown made a recommendation for 2 always stops.
Yes.
You're keeping those in, and you're talking, you want to read your amendment again, please?
The amendment would be to a request for staff to update the always stop policy and to defer the other locations until after that policy is updated.
Okay. Would you take that as a friendly amendment, Councillor Brown?
Respectfully, and to the councillor, not at this time.
Okay, so it's a formal amendment. Seconder? No seconder, okay.
Sorry, pardon me, Madam Mayor. A seconder to
To the
Councillor
formal
McDougall's.
amendment made by Councillor McDougall. Okay. Questions or comments on the amendment? Mr. CAO? Councillor Watton?
Thank you. If I may, Madam Mayor, does that mean that the ones that are listed will not be considered at this point in time? Is that your goal, Councillor McDougall?
Go ahead.
Sorry, only the ones that have been turned down at this point in time.
So they're not part of the recommendations. they're currently not part of, like, the only one, the all-way controls be installed at the intersection of Union Avenue and Victoria Street, Earl Cully Petty Boulevard, and that the bylaw appended to this attachment be approved, and that we're receiving the other report. So are you saying that you don't want Union Avenue and Victoria to have an all-way stop?
No,
Based on your amendment?
let me clarify. My amendment is to Councillor Brown's motion, so Councillor Brown's motion will stand, and it would, with the amendment that we would update the all-way stop policy, and the locations that have been turned down would be deferred until that policy approved.
Since they weren't included in the initial
Not part of it.
recommendation, why don't you just leave it as that the all-way stop policy or the warrant be reviewed, or how we worded it?
My concern is that they won't be further considered in the future.
Is that what you want? You don't want them to ever to be considered again? Is that it?
No, my issue is they're being considered right now under this current all-way stop policy. I'd like them considered under an updated all-way stop policy.
Okay, just needed to understand. All those, any other questions or comments on the amendment? No, I don't really understand it either. Mr. CEO?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just not sure if that's giving staff adequate direction. I think we've already mentioned, the director's mentioned that she's reviewed the all-way stop warrant, doesn't feel that an update is necessary, feels that it's consistent with the current policies, yet council's asking for an update when I think we've just said that an update, we don't feel an update's warrant. So what update is council looking for? What are they trying to achieve with this update that, and maybe there needs to be some thought given to that. And that the update would come back, she's already mentioned what the update would be.
Councillor McDougall, can you shed some light on that? Because the director has mentioned several times that there has been no change in the, what's the Ontario traffic? Okay, there's been no change in the OTM since 2000, and this particular policy is based on that. So what kind of changes would you be looking for? Is it based on the law?
Through you, Madam Mayor, my preferences would be to lean more towards what the City of Toronto has completed with looking at local intersections that have 2 collisions a year. It has local intersections that have exceedances of 250 vehicles in an average 4-hour period during the day, and some other differences from the OTM manual. And I'm sure that there's many engineers in the City of Toronto that have considered this.
Councillor Ross, do you still want to second that motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I believe that it still speaks to the consultation that's needed, that there's a divide between safe roads, safe intersections, and what the always stop warrant analysis is giving us at this point.
Did you want to say something, Mr. CAO?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just suggest that perhaps Councillor McDougall could put what he would like down in a motion
Okay.
and bring that motion back to the next council meeting. Therefore, we'd have
We
proper
need-
direction
yeah,
in
we
terms
need
of
firm
what
direction.
he's looking for.
Would you be willing to do that? Just table your amendment?
Yes.
Okay, so as it stands right now, there's the 2 that have, that are being recommended. The others are not at this point in time. So are you willing to table your amendment as well, as seconder?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, all right. Do we have to have a motion to table?
Do you want to table it
Or-
because it's not complete, or do you want to just ask to bring it back as a notice of motion?
Okay,
Complete it.
bring it back to the notice motion.
Bring it as a notice
Okay,
of
so
motion.
it's okay just to do that?
Otherwise, you're going to incomplete table motion.
Okay, so it's
Sorry,
already,
yeah.
so you're willing to bring it back as a
Yeah,
notice of motion?
I'll remove my amendment and bring it back as a notice of motion. Thank you,
Okay.
Madam Mayor.
Okay, all right. Councillor Brown, but before you speak, I wanted to mention that there was a statement made that known collisions, that would be the basis on every recommendation here. It's known collisions. We have no way of knowing any of these intersections of any little fender benders that haven't been reported, so they are all the same criteria. Go ahead, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't want this to become a feeding frenzy, and I would feel last thing I want. I have a lot of respect for Director Coleman and the work she does. I said that at the outset. Put my mic on. I said that at the outset, so, and I'm sure you heard me without the mic being on, but I have a lot of respect for what you do and how hard you work. I know that Councillor McDougall was mentioning the city of Toronto. I have statistics here from the city of Mississauga that talk about an average of 180 vehicles per hour, but I'm not gonna belabor it because I think it's probably been beaten to death. So I will say though, people are gonna roll stop signs anyway. It doesn't matter whether they're four-way stop signs or two-way stop signs. We've all seen it. Maybe some of us have done it. Maybe all of us have done it. But I don't think that should have any bearing on anything we do in terms of our decision today. So I'll just leave it at that and we can go forward.
Okay, thank you. We're ready to vote on the motion? Oh, Councillor Watton.
I'd just like to have the motion reread before we vote, please.
Do you want to read it, Councillor Brown?
Yes, and through you, Madam Mayor, that COMS 2019-47 all-way stop warrant analysis results be received, that all-way stop controls be installed at the intersection of Union Avenue and Victoria Street, Earl Cuddy Boulevard, that all-way stop controls be installed at the intersection of Perry Street and North Street, and that the bylaw appended as attachment 3 to report COMS 2019-47 be approved as amended.
Questions or comments? Surely not. All those in favor? I'm sorry, put your hands up high. 4, okay, that's passed. Thank you. Next one is the operating results, and Councillor McDougall, is that you that has pulled that?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, and it's on page 86, and it's the operating results up to November 30th, 2019. Go ahead, make the motion.
I do a motion to receive that.
Okay, wait a minute.
Hang on, I gotta
Is
get
it
to the
for
page.
information? Yep, okay. Go ahead, seconder. Councillor Watton, your question.
Mike, on page 88. Uh-oh,
Yes?
sorry, I was looking for Di and I didn't see her. Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. On page 88, a question was, what did we previously receive the OLG monies as if we didn't receive them as revenue?
Ms. Barton?
Thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor. I believe they were received right into the reserves, so it didn't throw through our profit and loss statement. So that was identified, and so we've changed it for how we're doing it in 2019 and we'll continue on in 2020. So the 2020 budget going forward, we will show the offsets of the OLG.
Further?
Thank you. On page 89, it talks about, and I think this is a question for Director Coleman, it talks about grading costs being lower as crews were more focused on ditching. How much of our grading did we not get done this year that we had budgeted is the question I wanted to ask. And similarly, on page 90, it talks about savings that we have because we didn't complete our slurry sealing budget as well.
Director?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. The grading I'm referring to here is the day-to-day maintenance of grading. It's not the gravel resurfacing program. Just make sure you know that. So we did all the gravel resurfacing program. But instead of having the graders out as often on the roads, crews were out doing ditching work this year more than they had in the past. So the second question, oh, the slurry seal. The slurry seal, we just don't have the invoice for it yet. We've spent all the money, but then we haven't received the invoice for about $100,000 right now.
Further, Councillor McDougall?
No, just a question. So we have the availability budget-wise to do more grading. I have a lot of complaints about grading on roads, so we have the availability budgetarily wise to have more grading done. It's just our crews are split up with, if they're ditching in they can't be necessarily grading. Is that the issue?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, we have 15 public works staff that do all of our road maintenance. Their salaries are divided up between 15 different categories of different types of work. So we don't have more people. So if they're doing ditching, those are the same people that would be doing grading. So we only have so much resources, and they can only do as much as they can do.
Okay, very good. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. The permit we're down into bylaws now, and I have 9.4.2 pulled. It's on page 121. And Councillor Guido, you pulled it. Did you want to read?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I did pull it, and I believe on direction of the clerk, after the second reading, I need to make my amendment.
So a mover for first and second reading, please. Councillor Brown, Councillor Watton. Third reading, do you have a
Yes,
comment or
I
question?
do. I would like to make an amendment on page 125 to remove item 11 under the Part 2 restrictions, where it states no fires are permitted in the Port Perry, Prince Albert urban area. In speaking with the fire chief, there is no exact known reason why this restriction was put in place, why a fire following the same rules as someone in Seagrave or Epsom or Nestleton, why we would have the restriction on Port Perry and Prince Albert. So my request is to remove number 11. They would still have to follow the rules of 5 meters distance before they're able to be approved for a burn permit. And I'm not sure if the chief wants to add anything to that, but that would be my amendment.
Chief, did you have any comment on that?
Through your worship, no, I have no problems with the general premise of the change to the bylaw. I think it would be fair and equitable, and I believe there's enough general provisions in place that it would prevent fires in very congested areas of whether it be Port Perry or Prince Albert or any other hamlet for that matter within the community.
Okay. Any questions or comments on that change? So are we good to do the vote? Okay, I need a seconder for the amendment. Councillor Ross. No questions or comments? All those in favor of the amendment? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Guido. And 9.4.6, a bylaw to amend the traffic bylaw. That was pulled, and that is the discussion that we just had. Page 146. Councillor Brown, you making that motion?
Yes, I am, Madam Mayor.
With the, do we have to do first and second reads? Okay, you need to read it.
Okay. That bylaw 85-19 be read a first and second time, and that section 1 of bylaw 85-19 be amended to include a stop sign at Perry Street and North Street, and that bylaw 85.19 be read a third time, and finally passed the 16th day of December 2019, and that the mayor and clerk are hereby directed to sign same and affix the corporate seal thereto.
Seconder? Councillor Ross. Questions or comments? We thoroughly debated this. All those in favor? And that's carried. Am I good? Okay. We now come to the end of our, regional report 9.2.8 was also part of the agenda. Just a slight change in something that we had approved before.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just a couple of things. There's not a lot to report, but I just would like to speak to the St. Field Road. I know Councillor McDougall and myself have received numerous emails about the condition of it and the repairs and the ongoing repairs. So in speaking with Region Works staff, yes, the road was repaired. Yes, the road is a mess. They feel there was emulsion failure on the lift treatment that they put, on the surface treatment that they put over it. So, and that is a contractor's problem. So being such, as the contract is under a 2-year warranty, the contractor is obligated to continue repairs probably throughout the winter because a new surface treatment cannot be put on at this time. But they do expect that in the spring there will be a complete new surface treatment put on it. In the interim, the speed limit has been reduced also on that road. I believe that Durham Region Police and as well as region staff were out there, and I'm not sure of the number, but numerous speeding tickets were issued, and which resulted in a temporary speed limit reduction on St. Field Road. And further to that, I'd just like to report that late this afternoon, I haven't been able to read it all, but the island safety review is completed. And there will be some immediate changes and some not so immediate changes and some budget items that would need to be approved by regional council. But until I have full, until I receive the okay to completely share the document, I just wanted to update everyone that it is complete. Quick glance shows that it was a very thorough review, and that there will be some changes for Island Road coming forward in the very, very near future. Thank you.
That answers your question of me earlier today. Save me a phone call. Thank you. Probably I got an email here too. I haven't checked. Okay, so that comes to the end of our agenda. Notices of motion, no new business. Sorry. Am I missing something here?
No, Councillor Guido just asked if I had a notice of motion for what we discussed tonight, but that's.
Can
will
we
come
take it
to-
verbally? No.
It'll come
okay.
back.
Yep.
Thank
It'll
you.
come back. Okay. No new business, no closed session. I need a confirming bylaw, please. Mover, Councillor Brown, Councillor McDougall. All those in favor? Thank you. Before we adjourn, I want to take this opportunity to wish each of you and staff a very Merry Christmas and a happy, healthy, prosperous 2020, and to those people in our community as well from all of council. So, motion to adjourn, Councillor Guido. Seconder, Councillor Watton. All those in favor? Thank you.